In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. I think today's gospel just provides a nice, simple reminder of one of the hardest things that it is, that we face in life as we navigate, and the complexities of life are becoming more and more, and it's becoming harder and harder to figure out like what's right to do. And a lot of times we tend to suffer from what they call like analysis paralysis, right? You know, analysis paralysis is when we look at the situation and we begin to analyze it. We try and gather as much data as possible. We try and look at all the options, what are all the outcomes from the different options. And we do this almost ad nauseum in order to try and figure out, well, what's the best way to do this, right? That there's really just one good way to do that. And sometimes we get paralyzed, that we're unable to take a step forward. And any time like you're in these life situations that are confusing, whether it be with respect to what are you going to do with schooling, how are you going to raise your kids, what job you're going to take, are you going to move to this area or that, buy this home, the scenarios are endless, right? And in all those situations, you know, many of them, there's no right or wrong answer, right? In a lot of life situations, there's no right or wrong answer. And no matter if you take this route or that route, there's always a degree of uncertainty that is built into the situation. But yet we're in these situations and we have to take a step forward. We have to take a step forward. And that step always requires a degree of faith. That step always requires that we launch out when there is an unknown in the equation. And that unknown is always it leaves us sometimes it leaves us losing sleep at night, or it's running through our minds throughout the day. But none of us are going to escape having to make that decision. We cannot live life the way it is, okay, without making decisions that have unknowns involved. And when we reflect on today's gospel, which comes from Luke chapter 5, it's a story that many of us are probably familiar with, where Jesus is teaching, and he has built a following up to this point, but like his 12 disciples that we know of formally haven't really clung to him. They're hearing him, but they haven't really latched on. And Peter's, in this, in the gospel of today, where he had just been fishing all night, coming back, and Jesus uses his boat to kind of launch out just a little bit in order to project his voice to teach. And then he looks at Peter, who's done fishing his net and didn't have a very good night of fishing, and he says, let's go fishing. All right, let's go out into the deep. And Peter at this point has a decision to make. And he's a fisherman, and he knows. He knows, like, you don't fish during the day, and you don't fish out in the deep. You fish at night, and you fish in the shallow. Right? He's analyzing the situation. He's looking at everything at his disposal from his experience, what he knows, what he's learned from other people. And he's in a situation. He's kind of got this posture of analyzing. He's analyzing life. And it's okay to analyze life, right? It's a good thing to look at life and to analyze, and to try and weigh out everything, and to look at all the possibilities, and to try and come to a certain decision. But even though he sits there and he analyzes, he has heard just enough, he has seen just enough, and exposed to Jesus just enough to realize that there's something different about this person. There's something different about Jesus. The way he talks with authority, the way he heals people, like, he is different. He is different. And Peter, much like us, has a choice to make. Do I sit here and paralyze myself and take a backseat in life, unable to take steps forward because I'm stuck just analyzing everything? Or do I take what I know but go beyond that and put my faith and trust in somebody who is different. Somebody who isn't bound by the same paralysis of analysis that we are. Like, we analyze because we're limited. He doesn't analyze because he is not limited. He sees far beyond what we see. He sees not only into the future, but he sees deep inside the heart of man. He knows the movements of the world. He knows it all. So he is never paralyzed in any way when it comes to moving forward. But for us, we have to learn from Peter and say, okay, well, I can either sit here and just be stuck, or I will put trust and faith into somebody who I'm seeing, and putting myself in the shoes of Peter, who I'm seeing lives outside of this world, who comes from outside of this world, who sees and controls the movements of this world. All of us are in these situations. And Peter makes the right decision. He doesn't know what to expect. He doesn't know what he will find. All he knows is there's a seed of doubt, there's a seed of confusion, but he's willing to do it. He's willing to be obedient. He's willing to try. Even though he has toiled all night and he's at the end of washing his nets, and that's a long and arduous process to wash your nets. And for them, it was really important. Because if you don't wash your nets after fishing, they break down sooner, and they had limited resources. So he had done all that, but he was willing to go more. He was willing to do more, which goes against everything that he knew. But he was willing to do it with one person, which was God. And he goes out and he launches and he lets his net down, and it's a big catch. And with the big catch, he now has other problems to solve. The boat's sinking, how do we get it back? What do I do with all this fish? He's got to solve other problems. But he figures it out. But he stumbles upon the greatest moment, likely the biggest, turning point in his life, which was to realize who he was eventually putting trust in. He was putting trust in somebody that moves and functions in a different way, that is not bound and is not limited, is able to look in any situation and see something that none of us will ever see. And that's who he chooses to put his trust in. That's who he chooses to take a step of faith with. And this was just the beginning. Because what did Jesus say to him at the end? Do not fear. So there were bigger steps to come. And we know this when we look at the full snapshot of Peter's life. There were bigger steps to come. There were bigger steps in which he had to have more faith than what he had just to launch out into the deep. But could he have taken the bigger steps later on in life if he couldn't have taken this one? All of us, and I'm making a generalization, all of us want to be able to take bigger steps with Christ. All of us want to be able to increase our faith over time. But to increase, we have to be able to take some steps of faith. We can't have it all. We're never going to have it all. And if you ever think and try and live your life of I'm going to make decisions knowing it all, you're going to be stuck. Life doesn't work like that. But when we take these steps of faith, little by little, he increases our faith over time. He increases the amount of trust we'll have over time. There were more and more unknowns in the life of the apostles than known. Why do we look at them as faithful? Why do we look and honor them and study their lives? Because they were able to navigate more unknowns. But they did it trusting in the one known constant, which that God would always provide. He would always make a way. He would always make ends meet. He would always provide the words when they needed it. He would provide the sustenance when they were running low. He would open up this door when they were stuck. And he does the same to us. He does the same to us. We can't anticipate it. We don't know where it'll come from. But he does the same to us. And he says, just follow me. Be obedient. Come out and let's go fishing together. And we can't hear that enough. God looking at each of us saying, let's go fishing together. And a fishing trip with God is always a stepping stone to something greater. But we got to be willing to go fishing. We have to be willing to go when it doesn't make sense. To go when our knowledge and reason just kind of hits a brick wall. But when we do it with God, we do it with the only known constant that we need. That He will provide. And He will lead, and He will direct, and He will open. We all need this reminder. I need it all the time. And I hope that in whatever it is you're wrestling with, you're reminded by today's gospel that He continues to call all of us. And it goes against what we know and what we see and what we can anticipate, but He will provide. And let us all take these steps of faith. Because when each of us takes a small step of faith, then together as a community, we can take bigger steps of faith together. And glory be to God forever. Amen. We'll take a minute to think about that.